Let me share the screen. Share.
Before that, Ignacio was going to sing us a song, right?
Yeah, sure. I get credits. So hi everyone, I'm Ignacio, but everyone call me Nacho. I mean, all Ignacios are Nachos in Spain, so you can call them Nacho. So I've been working for DataHub for the last couple of years as a UI engineer, and I will talk about briefly the UI because there's a lot of things to talk about. So I just want to give like a quick overview, like how the UI is structured and what are we doing over there, because I think it's a little bit of a black box right now. Okay, so what is the tech stack of the UI? Well, we have TypeScript, which is it's JavaScript with types, so it's not like very JavaScript, right? We have Ember, which is our single page application framework. And we're also using Yarn workspaces to divide our add-ons or NPM packages to, well, different packages. So I just want to give you a little bit of overview what is Ember, just because maybe people are not aware. So an Ember app is a structure, something like that, right? You have an app folder where everything, all your code is. You have your routes, which it's all your handlers are used over there, which goes together with the routes.ts. That's the one on the bottom, the path for the routes. I mean, you're going to write a path, and then it's going to go to a handler, right? And over there is going to render a template for that route, which is in templates. And then in that template, you're going to add components like a navbar, sidebar, a filter, search bar, whatever, right? And then your components are going to be in that folder. I put an asterisk because as you can see the components, the HPS, which is the template, it's like all the HTML is going to be over there, and the JavaScript below code is going to be in the TypeScript. So the template is going to be together, but that only happens when we're using Glimmer, which is the latest Ember UI way of doing the thing. So sometimes you won't see it like that. You will see the template inside components, templates components, and then the HPS will be there. But this is how it's supposed to be at the moment. Okay, so now we know what an app is. Now we use a concept called an Ember add-on. So what is an Ember add-on? So it's similar to an app in a way, but it's just it's meant to be a module, so you can share add-ons between different apps. It's an NPM package as well. So what you have in an Ember add-on is an app folder. So that app folder will be actually merged with your app folder in your application. So whatever JavaScript you have there, it will appear on your application when everything is compiled. So it has some advantages, like you can create one JavaScript on your app, and you can actually override one of the JavaScript of an add-on. Like your application should be on top of everything. So this is like the source of truth. But I mean, it's not a good practice unless you want to do something strange. But then you have your add-on folder. So that add-on folder is kind of private. So it's not, well, it's kind of visible. It depends. So normally what you do, I mean, in your add-on folder, you will put all your components, all your real code will be there. What you put on the app folder is just a re-export. You import your add-on folder and you re-export it there, so you have visibility in your app. And you do that because for templates, like for components, in the template, you don't explicitly import the things in Ember. You just it is there in your you use the name of the JavaScript file. So it's like this it's a little bit, we call it Ember magic, right? Which what is happening is it's going to show over there because you have a components and you have a JavaScript. So Ember will see like, oh, you have this component over there. There's a JavaScript over here. So this is a component, and I know that is there. So this is how Ember a little bit works. I'm going a little fast, but I don't have much time. So this is an example, right? You have your add-on, which it has one component, it has a service, and it has a util. Then in your app folder of the add-on, you have a component one in JavaScript, which exports the component one in TypeScript. And you also have service and service one. There's a JavaScript that exports the service one in TypeScript. So when you merge that with your app, which has component 2 and service 2, the result is something like this, where you have like these 2 components and these 2 services. So these 2 components are available to use in any template in the app, because you see how the merge went. And then you'll see in the add-on there's a util, so that does not need to be re-exported, because you can import that directly from your TypeScript. The problem is more like when you're trying to use a component inside a template, which is most of the time. That's why you need to do the re-export. So that's a little quick overview. If you have more, if you want to know more, I suggest that you can go to Ember. But just like a little bit quick overview how Ember works. Okay, so how we structure DataHub. So first we have package/data portal. So that's our main Ember app. That's where the app is going to be. So we'll go back. That is like the result here. And then we have like multiple other packages or groups or namespaces, depends on how you want to call it. So we have DataHub. That's where basically all the code is going to be there. Then we have Nacho UI, which is like the UI framework that we use for DataHub. It's our own custom UI framework. It's a long story. Then we have like DH tools, which is some like tooling that we have for craftsmanships and maintaining quality of the code, and also like transforming the PDLs schemas into the TypeScript definitions, which is essential actually. And then if you want to override, something we're doing at LinkedIn is we create our own folder over there, which is at LinkedIn. And if you want to override, it will be like at your company. And then we put this kind of like the same structure of folders inside there. And then you can create your own components over there, and then you can import it. And then I will get into that a little bit deeply. So going back, so data portal, right? That's the main application. So here, the goal of this is to be almost empty, because we can actually move all this logic of the app to components and add-ons. So that's our goal, is to keep this like as empty as possible. And why we do this? Well, the thing is, so if you want to override something over here, actually you probably need to fork it, because there's no easy way to modularize, right? So you need to fork it, and then it's a pain to merge this. So we keep it as thin as, we want to keep it as thin as possible, so there's nothing there. So you can, if you want to override it, it's basically a package JSON, which your package that you're gonna have. We want to make it more dynamically. That's a future thing that we are thinking about. It's just for now we mitigate it by making it very thin and lightweight, so there's nothing much to be to have conflicts on. Yeah, and if you look at the code, you will see that there's some components that's still out there. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to move all of these outside. It's taking its time, but we will get there. Then when we go to Nacho UI, that's a UI framework. It's like any other UI framework, but it's custom graph built with love inside LinkedIn. So it has like right now it has pills, tables, button, a drop down, an avatar, which is like all the user components, like like a rounded picture with a name, and some animations. We have like the the loading state, which shows the thing loading. So this is like the UI framework. There is still some natural components that instead of data portal, we want to move them out. Just so you're aware, we're working on that. Then what do we have? How do we structure the app? I think this is more like interesting. So inside DataHub, we divided the app in these 5 blocks. We have util, which is basically all those utility functions and maybe simple components that you can reuse that is like not very domain specific, but it doesn't fit in Nacho because it's like, it's a little bit domain specific, but not like quite generic to be like a UI framework. So you can put it in util. Oops. Then metadata types. So over there, we put all the model type generation. So like everything your API returns should be typed over there. Right now we are generating this type generation, but in the old time we didn't have that. So we still have some definitions over there. We're trying to migrate. So if you see definitions over there, just ignore it. It will be migrated to this automatically creation process for modeling. So that being said, metadata types is also quite empty because everything is generated. Data models. So data model is where we create an abstraction, a little bit of abstraction between what the API returns to and what the UI can render. And what we do is, that's where the mapping exists, right? So we create, for example, data sets. We create a class, which is a data set that is like the UI data set, and that reference the backend UI, the backend data set as well. So you can do some mapping and some massaging over there if you need some transformation of data. So that's data models. There's no components over there because it's more like massaging data and handling data. We have shared. Shared is basically all the components for DataHub, like the search bar, the nav bar, the search results, the entity page components, like the generic components should be there. Everything that is basically DataHub. And then we have entities. So here is where we you store all these custom things that you want for example, data set. You want a specific graph for data set. So you put in entities. In the past, we divided entity into different components. So for example, you have data set component, and then you have user component, and then we store those components inside those packages. But the problem is we had a performance issue. And so we combine them into this add-on. You totally can create your own add-on for data sets if you want to. But we combine them into entities, and inside you will see some folders like dataset, which is the dataset part, and then you will see users, and that's the user part. Check. Okay. So just to give you an example, what's inside metadata types? So metadata types, you will see something like this, like a dataset. It just whatever the API returns. So the dataset has a description, remove is removed, and then some aspects like it's deprecated, likes, all of that. I think it's pretty simple. That's what the GMA actually returns, if I'm correct, right, Marsh? So this is the types. So basically, from the UI, you want to know what the APIs are returning. So that's why this is generated, because there's already a place where this is defined, and what we want to know is have some type safety. So that's why we generate these types. Okay, and then what is in data model? So I've talked about that abstraction. So it looks something like this. So we have this dataset entity, which is the UI dataset entity, and then extend some base entity where we have some basic functionality, some that is grouping this base entity. So, and then you will see this generic, which is dataset, and that's the type of the API, the entity of the API is going to return. And we will have an entity field inside base entity that is of this type. So entity here, if you see one way, for example, here, I cannot highlight. Do you see the mouse right away?
Yes.
Yes, you see the mouse? Okay. So at least I'm not highlighting. You see what I'm hovering. So you see entity over here. So the entity over here is the, it's actually of type dataset. So if you see entity.description actually maps to dataset description, right? So this is like one-to-one. So that's why we can like one way and like an alias, but you can do like some computed function and you can like, transform the data. And like, for example, if you need to combine description here with removed or some other field, you could totally can do it, right? So you have more freedom and you're not like that coupled with the data that is coming from the API. And then we have other static functions, which is, for example, display name. So that is how we refer this entity from a URL. Like if you see, for example, slash entity, sorry, DataHub slash, and then you expect like an entity name, you will see dataset. So it's like DataHub slash datasets because it's here slash, and then the ID or the URN. So that's how we map those things because we have this display name over here. And then we have render props, which is it's a way that we tell it's basically a configuration. It's a JSON that gives us a way to render this. Tell us how to render this entity, right? So, and I will talk about a little bit more about these render props. That is very important. So if you want to create your own entity, you probably need to, I mean, you will need to specify the render props because that's how it's gonna, that is gonna tell how DataHub is gonna render the browsing, the search, and the entity page, right? So, okay, this is a summary. What is a render prop? And then, so it has configuration for search, it has configuration for browse, and it has a configuration for entity page. So this is like, I put a screenshot of like the three main parts of DataHub, right? So you have a search, and then in the search for an entity, you probably want to specify which fields you want to show, like data origin here, and it will read that. So for example, in search, it will say, oh, data origin is a field that I want to show. And also I want to show that in a filter, like here. I think I had a little bit more detail about that. For browsing, so browsing is not much to specify right now, but configuration is more like you want to have it or not. And that depends on the APIs, if it's enabled or not enabled. Sorry. What is going on? I think the touchpad, when I scroll up and down, it goes crazy. Sorry. So the browsing, and that depends on the APIs. If you have Elasticsearch and it can return like a hierarchy for that entity, then you can enable browse. And then you have entity page. The entity page, I will talk about more because it's more complicated than everything else. So for search, yeah, like you specify what properties to show, and then what filters, and then additional components that you may want to render, like this like component, but you can actually add more things if you want to, just to allow some flexibility and customize experience. The thing that I like from properties to show is that when you specify a property, you can define if you want to show, like, for example, data origin, you can define if you want a filter for it. And also if you want an autocomplete for it. So if you like select a data origin, it kind of maps, like it knows that you're selecting like that field. So they're filtering actually that field that is showing over there, so we can do more things later. So everything, also if you're autocomplete, it knows that you're trying to autocomplete that field as well. Just basically define the properties, and if you want to show it as filters, and or if you want to autocomplete, and that, yeah, that's basically search. Browse, as I said, not much to do here. Just you have to enable it or not, and that depends if you have like a specific hierarchy. For example, data set, you can put like if there is deployed in Fabric or not, and then what type of data set, and then the name of the data set. If like HDFS, you have folders, you can do that. But for example, for users, you may not have a hierarchy. Actually, well, if your organization has a hierarchy, like departments, you can do that. You can use that as your browsing experience, right? But it depends on the entity type. Some entity types might be a little bit difficult to classify. So, and then you have the entity page. So in the entity page, you have, start from the top, breadcrumbs. So actually breadcrumbs is not something that you specify in entity page, because you need a hierarchy to show breadcrumbs. So if you enable browse, you will have breadcrumbs. If you don't enable browse, you won't have breadcrumbs for that entity. Then you have the entity name, and then you can add some tags that you want to show. You can add, also in this entity, there's, I didn't show it, but you have properties as well. You have some custom components like health that we're showing over here, and dislike social actions that we have. You can add this custom, and you can add more customized things that you may want to put in the header for that. And then the beefy part of this thing is the tab, right? So we have you can add your own tabs. But it's a configuration thing, like I want a schema type, I want status type tab, I want ownership tab, and then inside this tab, you specify what components you want to render. Like, oh, I have my custom component here, so I want to render this custom component inside schema. And then when you go to schema, it's going to try to render that custom component, and then you have your own freedom to do whatever you want to. But as well, we give you some pre-built components like tables that you can use. So if you generate the data for a table to consume, you can it's kind of like wiring those up, and then it will show a table with the data, which is actually a very common use case. And so you can create your own entity page by just providing configuration and not adding any new component or for your entity. Okay, so
Nacho, quick time check. Couple of more minutes.
Couple more minutes. Okay,
yeah,
that's what I was checking. Yeah, so just an example. Well, yeah. Sorry, I lost my trail. So this is like in data models, right? We were in this layer of packages. So we now live in data models, and we're going to the next one, which is share. What's in shared? So it was, for example, this social action, because it's something that is shareable. There's a bunch of more components over there, but it's not something that you will need to add. You won't need to add anything in share. And as well, this is the only thing that you may need to, like in DataHub entities, we have one for like data sets, and this is data set schema because it's very specific to data set. So this is like a custom component for data set. Okay, so how to customize DataHub? That's a very good question, but I want to cut it right here. Maybe we can add a next session, like to be very specific how to do it now that we know a little bit more about how is the structure. And also we're running out of time. So if you're looking forward for a session like this, just ping us and we will do it. Just a sneak peek was something that that you need to do is, as I said, you need to create your custom components inside that entities package, or you just, I mean, you can create your own. You can create your models and pass the configuration, which is the render props, and you should be done, right? Of course, it's not as simple as that, but an overview is something like this. What next for us is, like, we want to move all these files from data portal to DataHub. So if you see a lot of migration, a lot of files changes in right now, it's because of this. If you're trying to modify something in data portal, just be careful, because we're probably going to move that out. We want to do this automatic model generation from like the open source models. It's not completely flushed, so we're getting there. And then we have the mid tier. I didn't talk about the mid tier, but which is the APIs that the UI talks to. We need to upgrade them to keep them in sync. That's a very important thing right now. That's, for example, the lineage graph. Once we do that, then you're gonna see the new lineage graph that we have built in the UI. And the other thing is we want to move to open source first, meaning that this DataHub folder that you see in open source, we are working on it internally, and then we basically move these changes outside. So we want to change that process and actually push directly to open source, and then use that as a package inside LinkedIn. And that's basically it. Thank you. And if you have questions, yeah, you can ask questions now, if we have time. Naga.
Yep. Thanks, Nacho. That's definitely interesting. Any questions now? Anyone?
I went a little bit fast, and maybe I didn't explain some details, like some things very detailed. But yeah, I don't.
Yeah, we can share. We will share all the slides later on GitHub, so people can go through them again. And of course, this recording will also be shared as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.